There's no questioning that Bitcoin is the best invention since sliced bread, but if what I'm about to say comes true, then we could all be headed for some serious trouble, regardless if you hold the asset or not. You see, in a perfect reality, the creation of Bitcoin was supposed to be the catalyst that leads to decentralization of the financial system, borderless transactions, financial freedom, and so much more. But what if instead it has narrowly led us to something far worse? This video is brought to you by our channel partner Chirply, the world's first fully automated influencer marketing platform. Chirply allows creators to get matched instantly with brands, set your own terms and rates, and let Chirply simply handle the rest so you can focus on what's most important: creating. If you'd like to learn more on how Chirply can supercharge your influencer journey, check out the link in the description. Let's take a look at the dark side of Bitcoin's legacy and how certain parties are using the same technologies meant to be the catalyst for financial freedom to instead create a vessel for surveillance, control, and potentially the loss of financial freedom for everyone. Now, in order to understand how Bitcoin's legacy may have become weaponized against financial freedom, we first need to go back to its origins. Created on the heels of the 2008 financial crisis, Bitcoin was a direct response to the failures of the traditional financial system. During this period, trust in financial institutions was at an all-time low, as many people impacted by the crisis realized a hard truth: the financial system wasn't built to serve them. It was built to serve those in power instead. But then, in a twist of fate, in 2009, an anonymous figure named Satoshi Nakamoto released the Bitcoin white paper. It outlined a radical and revolutionary idea: an independent, peer-to-peer decentralized currency that would operate outside the governments and banks. You see, at its core, Bitcoin was meant to incite a revolution, an escape from the centralized financial system that has long dictated the flow of money and power. Its promise of decentralization, borderless transactions, and financial sovereignty sparked a movement that challenged the very foundation of traditional finance. But as history has shown, every revolution invites resistance. And in this case, it didn't take long for governments and central banks to recognize the existential threat that Bitcoin posed to their control. While at first the response was dismissive, it didn't take long for it to turn hostile. Governments cracked down on exchanges, implemented strict regulations, and in some cases even outright banned Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency transactions. But what if at the same time, behind closed doors, a different strategy emerged? This strategy would at face value let the public think that the government wanted absolutely nothing to do with Bitcoin and crypto, but at the same time they learned from Bitcoin, adapt to it, and ultimately used its innovations to strengthen financial control instead of weakening it. And that's where the real danger lies, because what may have started as a revolution for financial freedom also could have inadvertently paved the way for one of the greatest financial surveillance tools ever created: central bank digital currencies. But how exactly did this shift happen, and why should we be concerned? Let's dive deeper to find out. You see, as Bitcoin gained mainstream attention, it didn't take long for governments and central banks alike to realize that they really had two choices: fight the inevitable rise of digital assets, or co-opt the technology for their own purposes. After all, Bitcoin's undeniable success posed a great threat to the existing financial institutions in power, and something had to be done. This realization gave birth to the idea of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. You see, CBDCs are government-issued digital currencies, of which there are two types: Retail and wholesale. A retail CBDC is essentially a digital version of cash available to the general public that allows individuals and businesses to make payments directly without needing a bank account. On the other hand, a wholesale CBDC is a digital currency used exclusively by financial institutions for large transactions and interbank settlements, and they are unavailable to the general public. The whole idea regarding the use case of both retail and wholesale CBDCs is to modernize the financial system by providing a secure and efficient means of enhancing payments, settlements, and financial inclusion. Now, on the surface, CBDCs appear to be nothing more than a harmless natural evolution of money. But in reality, they represent a profound shift in financial control. Unlike Bitcoin, which is decentralized and resistant to censorship, CBDCs operate on government-controlled permissioned blockchains, allowing central banks to oversee, track, and even manipulate transactions in real time. Perhaps the most alarming feature of CBDCs is their programmability. This could, in theory, allow governments to set restrictions on how money is spent, where it can be used, and even impose expiration dates on funds to encourage specific economic behaviors. Now, although this may seem like some distant dystopian reality, unfortunately, it's already happening today. Since 2020, China's CBDC, the digital yuan, has been getting gradually rolled out across different cities within the country. Unlike cash that allows for anonymous transactions, the digital yuan is fully traceable and tied to users' identities. The Chinese government has already demonstrated the power of this system by using it to enforce social credit policies. These restrict individuals' abilities to do things like purchase train tickets or access financial services if they are deemed untrustworthy. This level of financial surveillance effectively eliminates privacy, giving the state an unprecedented level of control over personal economic activity. Now, I know that may not be surprising to many of us that a country like China, due to their political systems in place, were able to accomplish this dystopian reality so successfully. That being said, you may be under the belief that Western countries would never actually be able to implement CBDCs at the same scale as China due to their democratic systems. However, you unfortunately would be wrong. The truth is, foundations are already being put in place to make this happen across much of the Western world. But will they actually be able to follow through with them on a large scale? Well, that's the big question. Now, it obviously didn't take very long after the launch of Bitcoin for Western countries to begin researching the implementation of CBDCs. During the period between 2017 and 2019, the central banks in Sweden, Canada, England, and the European Central Bank all published early research papers on the matter. But while most of the groundwork for this dystopian financial tech was laid out during the late 2010s, efforts to implement it actually accelerated significantly after 2020. This can largely be attributed to the successful launch of China's digital yuan, but also the decline of cash, digital payment adoption, economic instability, and most importantly, concerns over financial sovereignty. But this push for CBDCs in the West wasn't just about modernizing payments. Instead, it can easily be seen as a direct response to the rise of Bitcoin, other prominent cryptos, and stablecoins, with stablecoins being responsible for $30 trillion of volume in 2024. Behind closed doors, central banks viewed the implementation of CBDCs as an opportunity to phase out cash, centralize monetary control, and eliminate the financial autonomy that cryptos like Bitcoin allowed individuals to achieve. For a moment, it looked like the US was on the verge of a total CBDC takeover, with federal agencies and institutions extensively laying out the groundwork for their implementation. An aggressive rollout of CBDCs seemed all but inevitable. That is, of course, until members of the public began to fight back. Privacy advocates, financial analysts, and crypto supporters alike all took to social media in droves to express opposition to CBDCs, exposing the risk of financial surveillance and government control they would allow. This started a movement that inevitably pressured politicians to push back. One of the first of them was Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, where in 2023 he announced he was effectively banning the use of any CBDCs in his state. state. This set a critical precedent for other politicians in the country to follow, and follow they did. As recently as late January 2025, President Trump actually signed an executive order effectively banning the use of CBDCs in the entire country. Now, if history has shown us anything, it's that when those in power want something, they rarely stop in their quest to get it. While recent politicians' victories may have stalled CBDC's implementation in the United States, unfortunately, the fight is far from over. The truth is, Trump's executive order is only a mere roadblock in the implementation of CBDCs in this country. So some may be under the impression that the action of Trump has forced central banks to abandon their CBDC plans altogether. In reality, they've simply adjusted their strategies ahead. In fact, what's most alarming is prior to this executive order, banks had effectively graduated from research stage and moved on to development stage. You see, the key issue is that the Federal Reserve operates independently of the US government. So while Congress did effectively create the Fed, at the same time, the agency doesn't require executive approval to research or develop financial systems. They're only prevented from using federal agencies like the US Treasury to promote or implement CBDCs at this time. Also, in the case that a pro-CBDC president takes office in the future, Trump's executive order can be reversed. Not only that, but if a future Congress is also pro-CBDC, they could pass legislation for a full-scale rollout as well. And believe me, the Fed would be ready. In 2023, the Fed launched their Fed Now service, which is an instant payment platform that operates 24/7. While this isn't a CBDC, it does represent a significant advancement in the US payment infrastructure that could very well lay down the groundwork to launch one. But with that much being said, what would be the potential catalyst for the launch of a CBDC in the future? And better yet, is it already inevitable at this point? If a financial crisis or economic collapse or major war were to occur, the argument for CBDCs could easily be revived overnight. Governments would position them as a necessary solution to provide rapid financial relief, prevent fraud, and stabilize the banking system. Think about it this way. We saw how quickly the government mobilized to establish emergency measures during the pandemic. So knowing that, what's stopping them from using another crisis to justify the next phase of financial control? After all, the IMF, WEF, and BIS have already openly supported CBDCs, meaning a coordinated global push could override political resistance if the right crisis emerges. And despite the pushback against CBDCs that we've seen in the US, the rest of the world has not been as fortunate. As of today, there are over 114 countries actively researching or developing CBDCs. In fact, the European Central Bank has already put systems in place to move forward with a digital euro and is expected to be finalized as early as late 2025. Meanwhile, central banks in Switzerland, France, and Singapore are already testing wholesale CBDCs for interbank transactions, ensuring that part of their financial system will be primed for CBDC adoption. At the end of the day, I think I made it perfectly clear. The battle for financial freedom is more than just Bitcoin versus CBDCs. It's about control versus autonomy, privacy versus surveillance, and ultimately, who gets to decide how money is used. The truth is, power is a drug, and governments and politicians are addicted to looking for more ways to further their control. And if something like Bitcoin gets in the way of that, it's going to cause issues. So even if they can't ban Bitcoin outright, they can still tighten their grip through taxation, regulation, and controlling exchanges and banks, or even just having their buddies like BlackRock and Fidelity buy up as much as they can so it prices out the consumer. The question now is whether Bitcoin can remain a true alternative to TradFi, Or will it be co-opted into the very system it was meant to disrupt? Either way, decentralization is far from dead. Things like privacy tech, layer 2 solutions, DeFi, and other crypto narratives are evolving rapidly, offering new and different ways to keep financial freedom alive. But this fight isn't won by technology alone. Staying informed, pushing for financial privacy from your local politicians, and reinforcing or educating people about the importance of decentralization will be critical in the years ahead. So even though while the future is still unwritten, there's one thing that is absolutely for certain. The war for financial freedom isn't coming. It's already here. You can either fight back or sleepwalk into a reality where freedom over your money is nothing more than an illusion. It's ultimately up to you.